I watched everything that exists within the Cars universe, and when I say everything, I mean everything. Every Mater's Tall Tales, the new Disney Plus series, and the three mainline Cars films, and I am going to rate all of it on a very scientific scale I created myself, designed for the specific purpose of being applied to the Cars universe. I want to tell you a story about a boy whose name is Vince, and in 2006, his older brother and sister left for youth camp. What did that mean for 6-year-old Vince and his brother? They were stranded at home, without their older siblings, and their parents decided to take them to see Cars in the movie theater. This movie was practically designed for them. The fast-driving, cartoonish race cars were more than enough to keep Vince and Ben entertained, and the emotion and heart that came from Radiator Springs and the gang was enjoyable for their parents. From that day on, Vince and Ben were hooked. Vince and Ben are me and my younger brother, by the way. They got Cars decorations for their bedrooms, the Lightning McQueen TV, Cars toys, the Cars video game for GameCube, Cars on DVD, but unfortunately, not the Ramon DVD player. That thing taunted us in the paper slip that came in the Cars DVD for our entire childhood. Cars became everything to me and my little brother. We even showed it to our grandpa, and he loved it. He even dropped some crazy grandpa lore about his old racing days and the time when he had to push his actual Hudson up a hill during a race. Cars meant a lot to me and my brother growing up, and since the show came out on Disney Plus a few months back, I thought to myself, what if I watched literally everything in the Cars universe, and then try and rate it on all for YouTube video? This could be fun, right? Right? I do have to come clean. I'm not including 3 of the shorts on this list because they aren't available on Disney+. Those shorts are Cad Spinner, Vitaminimals Air Spectacular, and Miss Fritter's Racing School. Everything else for this ranking was available on Disney+. I mean, I found some ripped versions of Cad Spinner and Vitaminimals Air Spectacular, but I could not for the life of me find Miss Fritter's Racing School, so I just figured on not including it if it wasn't on Disney+. Okay, let's get to the rating. I'm going to be rating these movies on a very scientific rating system that was crafted for the Cars movies, the Carsiness scale. Pretty much, I'll be rating each movie's Carsiness, which is determined by how carsy the movie, short, or show is. Carsy is defined by me as how an entry into the Cars franchise lives up to the legacy of the first Cars films. That definition leads you to the conclusion that Cars is obviously a 10 out of 10 on the Carsiness scale. To explain what a 10 out of 10 on the Carsiness scale means, let me tell you how I feel about the movie Cars. Cars. This movie, man. It has a perfect balance of entertainment for both kids and adults. At surface level, it looks like just a children's movie about colorful and fast cars, but behind its shiny polish is a real story about a guy who has gotten too far ahead of himself in the race of life, pun absolutely intended, and actually had to be forced to slow down in order to find real joy and happiness, but without throwing away his passions. It's also a story about a real man overcoming resentment, being willing to reconcile past trauma, and rediscovering what drew him to that passion in the first place. The cast of characters is great too, from Luigi to Ramon to the Rust-eze guys. Every character has their own moment and is able to add to the story in some way. The jokes mostly land, and the pacing of the movie is just great. At a runtime of an hour and 57 minutes, it really doesn't feel like it. As a kid, I watched this movie so many times and I never got tired of it. I'd watch the whole thing and be entertained the entire time. Now, as an adult, I can still turn it on and watch and enjoy the whole thing. The movie may have some flaws somewhere in there, but I have honestly never found them. I've consistently watched and enjoyed this movie for my entire life. As a kid, I got excited to see Lightning race and laugh at Mater's antics. Now, as a 23-year-old newlywed man, I look forward to seeing Lightning slow down from chasing everything, fall in love with Sally, become best friends with Mater. I also look forward to seeing Doc start out as a harsh and grumpy old man, but to see him and Lightning eventually grow together and have that reignite Doc's passion for racing. With that being said, in order for something to get a 10 out of 10 on the Carsiness scale, it needs to have that same balance of childlike appearance but grounded in heart-filled story. Now to see how everything else in the Cars universe stacks up against it. If this is your first introduction to the sheer amount of content in the Cars universe, you are just simply not prepared for this. Rescue Squad Mater. It's the first of the Mater's Tall Tales, so it establishes the structure that every other Mater's Tall Tales follows. The format shows Mater and Lightning having a conversation. They see something or something gets brought up in conversation. Mater says he has been a part of what was brought up, and then we see what happened from Mater's perspective. Eventually, Lightning joins the story too, and then it ends with something from the tall tale actually being true, with a few exceptions. It's a cute structure, and Rescue Squad Mater does it very well. It just strictly follows the structure and doesn't add anything else to it. As for the story itself, it's lacking in that there's just not much of one. To be fair, this is just a Cars tune, but some of the other shorts have real stories outside of the Mater's Tall Tale format. The action scenes are fun, and it's an entertaining few minutes to see Mater fight a fire that Lightning is stuck in, and then Mater also being the doctor. As for the Carsiness scale, the short lives up to the broad Cars brand of being geared towards children, but without much for anyone else. And they could only do so much with it being just a few minutes long. All that being said, I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10 Cars-shaped clouds. Mater the Greater is more of the same that we got from Rescue Squad Mater, but without the novelty of it being the first. And honestly, just to make this easier, here are all of the Mater's Tall Tales that fit in this category of not stepping out of the format I laid out earlier. El Matador, Tokyo Mater, UFM, Heavy Metal Mater, Monster Truck Mater, and Moon Mater. All of these get 5 out of 10 Cozy Cone motel rooms. The reason why they only get 5 out of 10 Cozy Cone motel rooms is because they're all fine. They do the format of Mater's Tall Tales well, but they just don't step out of that format. And that format just lends itself to only being appealing to a 6 to 10-year-old boy. No one else is going to get much out of the format than that demographic, and so it gets a 5 out of 10 Cozy Cone motel rooms. Now that I have upset all of the Mater's Tall Tales fans, there are 3 more Tall Tales that actually step outside of the format a bit. The first one of those is Air Mater. Air Mater was made to promote the Cars spin-off film Planes, and it takes place in the town that Planes takes place in, and it even has some of the characters from Planes. This one is pretty close to being in the group of shorts that are all the same, but because there is an element of training and character relationship that isn't in the other group, I would say it's enough to give it a 6 Fillmore's Organic Fuel out of 10. Mater Private Eye is essentially just a film noir crammed into 5 minutes. It hits every plot point: the femme fatale, the high contrast lighting, the male protagonist, the mob villain goons. It is a fun watch and a decent introduction into the film noir genre. As a viewer, you can get a sense of the extra work that went into this short that is vacant from the other Mater's Tall Tales. Even with its short length, Mater Private Eye could be fun for anyone who's a fan of film noir and is familiar with the Cars characters. I'm going to be a little bit bold and say that this is a 7.5 white-wooled tires out of 10 on the Carsiness scale. Time Travel Mater asks more questions than it answers, if I'm being honest. It starts off with the standard format, but quickly goes into a time travel story that breaks the format quite a bit. The short maybe implies that Radiator Springs exists as it is today because Mater time traveled last week. Yeah, that's why I said it asks more questions than it answers, and I don't really want to get into an existential crisis over a Cars short. The story actually does a really good job at elevating the format through the time travel story. Usually Lightning just shows up randomly, but in this one he gets pulled in because Mater time traveled there to get him to help start Radiator Springs. Apart from the time travel bit, the origin story of Radiator Springs is really cool to see. It's a really cute short, and I think you should see it for yourself. It definitely does the best job at adding to the Mater's Tall Tales format of any of the shorts, and it's also an entertaining watch for any fan of the Cars movies. It's not just aiming towards pleasing little kids, and does a bit more with the story, so this gets 8 Mater's Hoods out of 10 on the Carsiness scale. These next group of shorts are grouped into the Tales from Radiator Springs category. There are 4 of them, and 3 of these 4 are pretty hard to categorize with everything else, because they aren't even really stories. The shorts are called Spinning, Bugged, and Hiccups. I think I'll give these 3 all a 4 framed newspaper of Doc Hudson's Crash out of 10 on the Carziness scale. They don't really do anything wrong other than just being really short and not giving much story. They're fine enough to have on in the background, but they don't really last long enough to have on in the background. I'm not sure what the context would be for anyone to watch these shorts unless you're an actual toddler, which I guess might be the intended audience for these. I'm not really sure though, because they all aired on Disney Channel for the first time, which is geared toward young teenagers. Whoever the target audience for these shorts are, they're still just a 4 out of 10 on the Carziness scale. The Radiator Springs 500 and a Half is the only short in the Tales from Radiator Springs subseries that is actually a story. This short follows an event that is happening in Radiator Springs where a group of the cars are going to drive the original path that Stanley took to get to Radiator Springs. But then a group of racers show up to challenge Lightning to a race. They decide to take the same path as everyone else, but they end up taking a wrong turn and end up getting pretty scared. That is about where the story of the short ends. It doesn't get more in depth than that. Most of the short is just Lightning and the other group of racers getting scared, which could be annoying for older viewers, but pretty entertaining for younger ones. It is fine enough short, but I wouldn't put it up there with Time Travel Mater or anything. I think I'll give this 6 Nice Butte bumper stickers out of 10 on the Carziness scale. Mater and the Ghost Light is easily my favorite Cars short. This one came on the original DVD in the bonus features, and I'm pretty sure I have memories of it automatically playing after the movie was over with Disney's Fast Play. My brother and I shared a room growing up, and we would fall asleep to watching movies a lot. When that movie was Cars, it would switch to Mater and the Ghost Light after the movie was over, and it would scare me awake every time. When I rewatched this short for the video during the opening sequence where Mater is scaring everyone, I found myself feeling really cozy. Something about the sound design and nighttime aesthetic of the opening of the short really had me feeling like it was a warm summer night when I was a kid. Not only are the vibes so good with this short, the story is put together pretty well and is pretty entertaining, even with half of the short being Mater running around screaming. When the town decides to prank Mater back and they all run away super fast after they tell him the Ghostlight story, it's just peak comedy. And then later when they repeat the joke again with the screaming banshee, it's so funny to me. And then when the banshee turns out to be real, but Mater doesn't even acknowledge him as a banshee, that still gets me. This might be a bold call, but on the Carziness scale, I have to give this a 9 Bessies out of 10. It has so much of the charm of the original movie baked into it, I just couldn't give it a lower score. Now that all of the shorts are out of the way, let's talk about the Disney Plus exclusive series, Cars on the Road. At first I debated on whether or not to rate the series as a whole, or to rate each episode separately. I ultimately decided to rate it as a whole based on how it is presented as a whole series on Disney+. If Mater's Tall Tales were all put together under one series, I would have rated them all together as well, but they are presented by Disney themselves as separate shorts. Anyways, let's rate Cars on the Road as a whole series. So this series tells the story of Lightning and Mater doing a cross-country road trip to Mater's sister's wedding. This trip takes them to a few quirky stops along the way, which are a dinosaur park, an old haunted hotel, the Salt Flats, a truck stop, a random cabin in the woods, a circus, and a B-movie film studio. On this trip, they meet a monster truck named Ivy. Her arc in the show is pretty short, and I don't understand why they didn't have her in more of the show. She left before she really even stayed, which I found a bit weird. I would think if they were going to introduce a new character that she would join them for the rest of the road trip. They easily could have wrote her into the rest of the road trip, but her leaving Lightning and Mater made sense the way they did write it. All of the stops they make during the road trip are quite fun though. The animation is really great. The Dino Park episode particularly looked really great. The rest of the episodes look good as well. The truck stop episode seemed pretty unnecessary to me, being the whole episode is just a musical number. When all the other episodes are in just such visually unique locations, this just seemed like an odd choice. I suppose they made it unique by adding the musical number, but that just didn't add enough for it to be able to stand next to the rest of the episodes. The show then ends at the wedding where Mater and his sister decide to race around the mansion. Yes, I said mansion. Mater apparently comes from old money. Oh, and the person that Mater's sister is marrying is related to Cruz from Cars 3, so she shows up too. Most of this series being just Mater and Lightning being in unique locations puts this series right at around a 7.5 Rusty's bumper ointments out of 10. Right where Mater Private Eye sits, I think is right for this series. It has a little something fun for everyone, but doesn't quite have the heart that is in the first movie. Still a worthwhile watch, with the show only coming in at 108 minutes altogether. Now we can finally get to the feature-length films. I bet before you watch this video you had no idea it would have taken this long to get to the actual movies. But you're still here, right? Okay, let's talk about everyone's favorite animated movie series about sentient vehicles. Planes. Oh, you thought we were going straight to the Cars movies? No, 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 no. There are still two Planes movies that we have to talk about first. The first Planes movie is just okay. It is about a crop duster named Dusty Crophopper, who dreams of leaving his life as a crop duster behind to become a racing plane. So it's not exactly a beat-for-beat remake of the Cars film, which I give it credit for. It does follow some of the same beats with a grumpy mentor akin to Doc Hudson, but in a weird attempt to differentiate planes from cars, they have Skipper lie about his service in World War II. This is a really wacky move. I don't really understand why the writers went this route. I understand wanting to be different than the Cars movie, but this one is already following a race for most of the movie, which is different enough from the first Cars movie. We do not need to have the mentor character do one of the most awful things that a person could do. Just really a bizarre choice. More about the rest of the film. After Dusty trains with Skipper, he barely makes it into the race around the globe by technicality. During the race, we get to know a cast of characters from around the world, and you know what that means when there's characters from around the world in a children's animated film. Lots of iffy stereotypes for easy jokes. I wouldn't say it's a major issue that plagues the film, but they are there, and it's obvious that the writers were just looking for low-hanging humor. That's kind of the vibe I get from the whole movie, just low-hanging fruit altogether. It seems like it's really trying to capture some of the cozy magic that Cars encompassed, but without going the extra mile in any area of the filmmaking process to really make the movie stand on its own and still have that magic. This should be a good time as any to mention that this movie was not created by Pixar. It was actually created by the now shut down Disney Toon Studios. The difference in animation studio is somewhat noticeable in the animation quality. This is coming from someone who isn't at all trained in animation or VFX, but has been a consumer of the Corridor Crew since middle school. But take this with a grain of salt anyways. The animation in Planes does look as if it's another studio trying to mimic Pixar's animation in Cars. All that to say, Planes is a 6 tire head shaped clouds out of 10 on the Carsiness scale. Planes Fire and Rescue really surprised me, if I'm being honest. For starters, the animation was a little bit of a complaint from the first one, but all of the imagery from the national parks look really nice. Speaking of that, I do not like the plane bird. It scares me. Planes Fire and Rescue is just an overall better movie than the first one. The story isn't just about someone who wants to race and then races. It's about a guy whose body can't keep up with his racing lifestyle, and so he has to take a break, and he wants to help out his town to train to be their new firefighter, and ends up finding new meaning through it. The new mentor character is written significantly better than Skipper this time around. This time, while also not being a copy and paste of Doc Hudson, it just didn't feel as lazy. Like, they put more time and energy into crafting Blade's character. Also, it helps that instead of lying about military service, that he was a 70s TV star whose co-star died during a stunt. That is a much more tolerable backstory that manages to be different enough, but not absolutely insane. The rest of the cast of characters are fun too, and there isn't any humor reliant on stereotypes this time around. Overall, just a solid improvement on the first Planes. Planes Fire and Rescue is able to capture the heart and fun of the first Cars movie without being reliant on characters and relationships we already know, without being a carbon copy of the story formula of Cars, and at a feature length. I would honestly watch this movie again, whereas the first Planes I don't think I'll need to ever watch again. You may be shocked, but I'm going to give this a 9 Welcome to Prop Wash Junction signs out of 10. Cars 3 is an interesting one. I think we all remember when that trailer came out of lightning crashing and everyone was going crazy like, the new Cars is going to be dark and scary and gritty, oh my gosh. In reality, it didn't exactly pan out that way, nor would I want it to. I was very skeptical that it was going to be actually dark and gritty, mostly because when I was reading the comments of that original trailer, someone mentioned that the plot synopsis was in the description, so I read it. And it wasn't that dark and gritty at all, it was actually just the plot synopsis of the movie that we ended up seeing. Before I start talking about the quality of the story, I do have to mention the beautiful animation. The hyper-realistic visuals really look great. It does look a bit odd next to the cartoony stylized cars, but it doesn't bother me at all. Okay, now back to the story. Cars 3 just confuses me. It follows up Cars 2, which was a bonkers sequel to Cars that completely throws away what made the first movie so special. And it is immediately better than that film, but still doesn't quite reach the heights of the first movie. It's not like the first Planes movie either, where they just are making a cheaper but different version of Cars. It's its own story, not reliant on the beats of the original, which I give it credit for. But also, its strongest parts are where it goes back to the cozy feel of Cars. The best portion of the movie is when he's in the town with all of Doc's old friends and is training with them. The rest of the movie isn't bad. Cruz is a nice enough addition, but the progression of her character isn't exactly natural. I have nothing wrong with introducing new protagonists and having the mantle handed over, but in a series where the first movie was so good and had such a great arc for Lightning, only for him to be pushed aside and have pretty much no development in the sequel, only to then get replaced at the end of the third movie by a new character, is just not a satisfying enough ending to Lightning's arc. Again, Cruz is a fun addition, and I'm not upset that this is the route they took. I think this issue is more at the fault of Cars 2, because it completely stepped away from the first film and essentially just made a feature-length Mater's Tall Tales. I don't know why Pixar went this way. I guess it just goes to show how much Cars 2 messed things up. Cars 3 is really a good film, but the fact that it has to be the finale to a trilogy where the sequel did nothing to add to Lightning's arc takes away from the potential that a Cars sequel really had. Maybe out there somewhere in the multiverse there's a world where Cars 2 wasn't a spy thriller and actually stayed within the realm of the first movie, and then the third movie could actually be a worthwhile conclusion to the Cars trilogy. But since we don't live in that world, Cars 3 is only going to get 8 Flo's V8 Cafe neon signs out of 10 on the Carsiness scale. Cars 2. If I hadn't said enough already. Mater gets his own spy thriller, yippee. That is exactly what everyone was asking for when presented with the idea of a sequel to the beloved movie Cars. This movie just depresses me. I don't want to talk about it. Like I said earlier, it's just a feature-length Mater's Tall Tales. The thing that is good and fun about Mater's Tall Tales is that they are short. It doesn't work at a feature length. If this movie was taken out of the Cars trilogy and was just a children's spy movie featuring cars, it would be decent enough. But the fact that they made this movie as a follow-up to Cars is beyond me. I don't care about the scientific integrity of the Carsiness scale anymore. 0 out of 10. Doesn't even get a cute Cars reference. We made it, folks. We rated all of the movies in the Cars universe on a scale that I created. This franchise has meant a lot to me over the years, and it was really fun to get all of my thoughts on it out there in the world. All I want is to make content that gets my thoughts out there in a way that you can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, since I don't have any other videos to recommend you yet, thanks for watching.